people wanted to clean up. Cool. All right. So again, welcome everybody to Black Empowerment Works, our grant workshop. This is the second of 4 workshops that we're going to be hosting around the Black Empowerment Works grant. This session, we're going to be doing an application deep dive and giving you all some tips for strong submissions. So just a quick welcome to let you know who's in the room and who's the Black Empowerment Works team. My name is Jeremiah Pennebaker. I am the Senior Associate for Black-led Social Change here at United Way. I like to think of myself as a thinker, and I'm always rolling with the punches, ready for whatever pops up. Our fearless leader, Janae Bradley, is the director of Black-led Social Change. She's visionary. She makes sure all the chaos that comes with this program is coordinated. And finally, we have Will Simpson, new kid on the block. He is our Black Empowerment Work Coordinator, and he will be with us throughout the duration of Cycle 4. So he's going to be hanging with us in these next few summer months. So kind of what we're going to be doing today, focusing on today is, first I'm going to give you an overview of Black Empowerment Works, kind of talk about the basic eligibility and what the program goals are. We're going to talk about some tips for navigating the application portal and getting into the application and figuring out how to apply, review of the eligibility survey and application content. Notice those are 2 separate things, but we're going to give you kind of a breakdown of what those questions, things will look like. And then finally, some general tips for strong grant submissions. So to kind of give you an overview of all the work that we're doing, United Way is in the business of systems change. And what that looks like is really building solutions and aligning systems to help our community thrive. And you see here on the right, we have this kind of graphic that kind of gives you an idea of what the work we're doing. So oftentimes people are seeing and addressing the systems that come from, that are happening in our community. But what we're looking to do as United Way is really address some of these root causes that large iceberg up under the water. So how do we shift power and relationships? How do we resource folks who are in traditionally under-resourced communities? And how do we shift mental models around the work that is happening within the community? So Black-led social change exists because we are compelled to hold space and provide resources to imagine and bring to life unencumbered, self-determined Black futures. That is kind of our tagline and how we choose to approach the work and what we're doing. But what exactly does that mean? So defining unencumbered, it is an adjective. It means to not be impeded, slowed down, free to move, advance, or go forward. The Black-led Social Change Initiative began as a response to a deficit. We used to often talk about how there was an overrepresentation of Black families in poverty, but there was an underinvestment in Black-led work that addressed poverty, especially the ones coming from grassroots work. But how do we shift our frame of reference when we're doing this work? How do we shift it towards resourcing and creating space for Black futures? And this is one of those moments where I would like to take a pause. If you do have, what we're looking to find out from you all in the audience is, what does it look like to create and resource Black futures to you? You can either come off mute and say something or enter something to the chat, and Will and Janae will be monitoring that as well. So I'll just take a pause if you have anything you want to add. Is there anything in the chat, Will or Janae?
I can.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I'll say that to me, it looks like really, I think I've said this before, but really starting with the youth and starting with Black women, because those are just the ones who traditionally are the main contact point for the family, right? So with the kids, just trying to start them early, and with the women, you're trying to get that person that is going to infiltrate the entire family.
Thank you for that, Miss Sarah. I hope I said that right. But yeah, thank you for that. Again, you can put something in the chat, but I'm hearing no other folks who want to jump in, but continue to talk in the chat or put things in as we move on. But really think about what does it look like to create these unencumbered Black futures. So what is Black Empowerment Works? I like to think of it as a grant program that's more than the money. So remember to mute yourself as you're coming in. What we're looking to do is engage community members as decision makers. One thing that's foundational to Black Empowerment Works is the belief that those closest to the problem or challenge are the ones closest to the solutions, which is why we look to have community members make our funding decisions as a program. Provide resources to community-based Black-led work, building solutions and transforming systems. Again, really, how do we create Black futures and create space for folks to build upon their work by resourcing those folks who are traditionally under-resourced. Finally, contribute to an ecosystem of support for Black social change makers. This is really what I view as kind of like the crux of the work, is creating a network of folks who can lean upon one another as Black social change makers or co-conspirators, and who are all focused on uplifting the greater Cincinnati Black community. So just to kind of hit like the basics of the eligibility requirements, this grant is open to nonprofits, for-profits, social enterprises, community coalitions, and individuals whose work meets our eligibility requirements. Just to kind of run through those really quickly, our geographic focus, so work should fall into United Way's 9-county service region, which includes parts of Northern Kentucky and Eastern Indiana. Black leadership and labor. We want the folks who are leading the organization, whether that be the board or executives within the organization, to identify predominantly as Black, and also for the work that the organization is doing to focus specifically on the Black community. Grassroots and community-based. Again, one thing that's foundational to Black Empowerment Works is we believe those who are closest to the problem or challenge are the ones closest to the solution. So we are looking to resource and fund folks who are in the communities, kind of building that groundswell of work, not folks who are coming from outside and doing a top-down effort. Community benefit. This eligibility requirement really separates us from a small business grant. We're looking to make sure that the work that we fund helps the community and not just an individual person or business. And then finally, actionable. This is really actionable within our grant year. We want to see measurable results from from the work that we invest in within our grant year. So that's currently from September to September. So if you can provide results in that year, then you would be actionable. And finally, one application per organization or body of work per year. So just one time, don't submit multiple applications. So some of our focus areas as a part of the work. Applicants will work to incorporate one or multiple of the listed focus areas. We have funded everything from birth equity, mental health, systems change, youth, social, emotional skill building. There's a multitude of focus areas that your work can fall up under. Some things that we view as ineligible. Again, general business and operating support. This is not a traditional small business grant. We really are looking to fund folks who are doing work in the community and not looking to build upon their own business or individual status. Capital campaigns. United Way as a whole does not fund capital campaigns, but specifically for Black Empowerment Works, capital campaigns typically don't fall into our bringing measurable results within the grant year, because they are such a large project with such a long time frame. Political campaigns are partisan work. As a 501c3, we cannot fund these things legally. There is cases where United Way and Black Empowerment Works, where we have funded issue-based work, but outside of that, supporting candidates and things is not something that we are legally allowed to fund. Debt reduction work or current work occurring prior to the grant period. Like I said, we're looking to fund work that is happening within our grant year from September to September. We're not looking to pay off things that have already happened. And finally, work occurring outside of the WGC 9-county service region, because that's not where we serve. Our aim is to invest in a diverse portfolio of work representing different organization structures. These can be nonprofits to individuals, different focus areas and communities. These grants will range from $4,000 to $40,000. And so everything I just said can be found on the Black Empowerment Works website. Is the #1 resource for all the information you may need. I'm going to do some, it's not going to be Hollywood magic. You're just going to see this jump for a second, but this is our Black Empowerment Works website. Again, deadline to apply for application, grant applications is June 28th at 5 p.m., but you'll find everything you need here. We have a table of contents, find eligibility, the process, the funding resources, and everything you may need here. If you click apply now, it will bring you all the way down to where you need to apply via EC Impact. One thing I do want to show you before we switch to that is please be sure to go here and download the grant information packet. This grant information packet literally has everything you need to apply for the grant. It even has table of contents, walks you through the process of how Black Empowerment works, how we make our decisions. And then it also gives you information on navigating the online system, gives you information about both the eligibility survey, the questions that we have on there, and all of the application questions that show up as well. So again, everything you need is here on the Black Empowerment Works grantee information packet. But with that, I will go ahead and stop my share
Before
and
you
toss.
stop
Oh,
sharing,
go
if you
ahead.
would go back to the Black Empowerment Works grantee site.
Grant site, got you.
Yep. If you scroll down, that's where you'll find right there the button to apply for Black Empowerment Works. This is really where my section of the presentation is going to pick up. So again, my name is Janae Bradley, the director of our Black-led social change team here at United Way. During my time, I'm going to talk through the navigation of EC Impact and then give you some insights on how to best answer the questions within the application. So you will go to our United Way website and click on that link to apply. That will take you to a website called the EC Impact, and you'll know that you're at the right place because you'll see the United Way of Greater Cincinnati brand information. If you've submitted an application in the past, so last year for Black Empowerment Works, or over the last couple of years for any other United Way funding, you likely already have an account. If you do, sign in with that existing account information. If you're not aware or remember what your account information is, feel free to reach out to a member of the Black Empowerment Works team and we'll locate that for you. If you're new to Black Empowerment Works, you will need to create an account in EC Impact. At the time that you create an account, it will also ask you to complete the eligibility questionnaire. And we'll step through that together right now. So we're here on the website. We know we're in the right place. We're going to click here to create a new EC Impact account and then click next. You will need to fill out all of the information that has an asterisk next to it. So you'll note that EIN, website, and maybe a couple of other fields do not have an asterisk. That means you do not need to fill that out. An agency name, if you're applying as an individual or as a business or a community coalition, just put in the name that you would like to refer to as the applicant. So that might be your individual name. I'm going to use some information that's already pre-populated. In this description box, this is not the full application. So you can include a 1-sentence description of the work that you do here. You don't have to go into much detail. For address, you'll want to click in your address. I'm going to put in a fake one right now, but you'll want to make sure that all of that information is in. Select the appropriate address type, email address type. Oh, sorry, one moment, please. It turns out that I was sharing the wrong screen this entire time. So let's get to the right screen. Are you all now seeing EC Impact, or Jeremiah, is it still showing the wrong screen?
No, we're seeing EC Impact now.
Okay, thank you for lifting that up. So This is what the eligibility form looks like now that you can see it. You'll fill out all of the information with an asterisk. You'll put in the correct contact. So if you are filling out this application, pick your position, your name and last name. And then at the bottom of the screen, you'll be asked to create login information. For this login information, we recommend that you use your email address. Sometimes people don't, but we feel like it is a best practice. So you'll put in an email address, you'll create a password that you'll remember, and you'll click next. And you'll see here that I forgot to select a phone number type. So the system will tell you if you're forgetting any information. When you do that, you'll be asked to put in your password again that you've created, and then click next. The only application that'll show up for you is Black Empowerment Works. So you'll click that, next again, and that will take you to the eligibility questionnaire. This is more so a reflection for you to determine if your work is eligible for Black Empowerment Works. We'll use this as a preliminary screen to understand more about you as well. So you'll just fill out these fields, your first and last name, pronouns. Again, you'll put in your email address and best phone number to reach you. Some of this information will feel duplicative. That is a function of the system. We apologize. You'll identify your organizational structure, and please select the option that best applies to you. So if you are a for-profit, select for-profit, and you'll answer yes or no to these questions. You'll select your focus areas and then provide a very brief description of your work. Again, this is not the Black Empowerment Works application, so you do not need to go in full detail here, just enough for us as the United Way team to determine your basic eligibility. The last section of this is giving us an understanding of how you heard about Black Empowerment Works. We use that for demographic and data purposes, and then you'll click continue. You'll be asked to confirm your application information, and then you'll be sent to the Black Empowerment Works EC Impact site. If you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to the team. Between the time that you submit your eligibility form and when you start your application, we at the United Way team will do the work of either approving your application or your eligibility questionnaire, asking you questions, or denying it. So keep an eye out for your email, the email address that you use to sign up, to see if we have any additional questions for you. But then you'll be able to get into the EC Impact system and see everything that it has within it. I'm going to show you a couple of important navigations within the system that I think will be helpful for you. And Jeremiah is going to tell me whether or not you're seeing my appropriate screen, because sometimes funky things happen to good people. Jeremiah, everything good?
Everything looks good.
Perfect. So some of the key navigation that you'll want to look out for in EC Impact. This home button is going to take you back to this screen. So if you're ever clicking into other spaces and you need to get back to the main screen, you will click home. Agency profile is some of that information that you filled out in the beginning when you were registering for your account. You won't likely need to revisit that all that often unless your address, phone number, or email address changes. You'll want to change that information here by clicking edit. Contacts is an important section that we want to lift up. So perhaps you have other people who are going to be collaborating with you to fill out the application. Rather than sharing your username and your password, you can create a contact for them in the system, and they will get their own unique username and password. To do that, you'll click Add Contact. You'll fill out this information for that person. You'll note that phone number is not required, and address will default to your organization's address, and you'll be sure to click Login Account. This will create an account for them. We will approve their account being generated, and then they can log into EC Impact and see your agent's information. I'll give a second for folks to mute. Thank you. You're not really going to use program profiles in this application, but you may want to look at agency history, agency email history. This is only going to show you emails that we sent through the EC Impact system. So not every email will be reflected here. You'll see that you have the ability to click to the application by clicking Apply Report within or the BEW application within this Apply Report section. And you can also access that application by going to the home page and clicking the application here from the process. Resource Center. You'll find a couple of resources for Black Empowerment Works over here, including a template that you can use for the budget, the information packet that Jeremiah referenced, and the ability to book a time to chat. Through Black Empowerment Works, we have the ability for folks to schedule question sessions or 30-minute sessions where you can ask what questions you have and we'll provide support to you. If you have a really brief question, feel free to just call us or send us an email, and you can find our phone number and email address through that homepage. If you've logged into EC Impact before, you'll notice that there's a timer here at the top. I want to lift up that you do not have just 2 hours to complete your application. We're not really sure why there's this 2-hour timer, but we assume that after 2 hours, it'll log you out or ask if you're still working in the system. We encourage that you save along the way just to make sure that you don't lose any information. But to reiterate, you have more than 2 hours to complete your application. When you get to your application page, and we have this in the deck as well, one of the first things that you'll want to do after you're approved is to create a program and assign it to the form packet. This is the only way that you'll have access to the full list of application questions. So we're going to do that together here, hopefully. And Jeremiah, again, will tell me if my screen is showing the wrong thing. Still good, Jeremiah?
You are still on EC Impact, yes.
Perfect. So when you click home and you click on one of these application buttons, you'll scroll all the way down and you'll see here that all I have is an organizational profile, which isn't the full list of application questions. I'm going to click this button to create a new program and assign it to the form packet. You'll put in a name of a program. It could be the name of your organization. That's fine. You'll click the impact area as Black Empowerment Works. You'll again provide a brief description. This is not the full Black Empowerment Works application, but reviewers who will be reading your application will see this information. You'll select yourself as the primary contact, copy over any information, put in your email address again, and your phone number again. We recognize the system is a little redundant in that way, but it does not copy over information. I'll click Save Registration. Again, I missed selecting the address type. The system is really good at calling me out on that. It'll show me my form. I'll hit Complete Registration and Continue. Now, when I go back to the application site, I see that I have additional sections in the application. We'll use the balance of our time now to talk about a handful of the questions within the applications and how to answer them. As we're answering those questions or talking through those questions, these 5 pillars of a strong application are going to come up time and time again. So as you're completing, think, is your proposed work clear, defined, and easy to understand? Recognizing that the audience reviewing your application are community members just like you. Does your budget and timeline sort of generate feasibility from that information that you've provided? Is it clear and is it feasible to carry it out? Are you demonstrating that with funding and support, you have sufficient capacity to carry out the work as you've proposed it? Is your work able to produce meaningful and measurable results within the grant year? And finally, does your work strongly align to one of the focus areas that we've identified? You do have the ability to incorporate an additional focus area, but your application at a minimum does have to touch on one of the focus areas that we've lifted up. Some of the first questions that you'll answer within the grant application are these, which I'm going to touch on very briefly. Program project name. This is the space where you can include the name of a specific program that you're looking to have funded, or just write the name of your organization or group or your name if you're seeking broader funding. You'll be asked to put in the amount of funding that you're requesting, which should not exceed $40,000 for an individual application. You'll need to make sure that you're describing the use of those funds later in the application. For focus area, geographic service area, and primary population served, We encourage you to only select the options that are really true for the work that you're carrying out. There's no benefit to selecting more focus areas than you're actually planning to work in. There's no benefit to selecting more communities than you actually have connections in. And if your focus is on one population, so whether it's young people or seniors or adults or families, just pick the one that you're directly working with. These are mostly for demographic purposes. In that early section, you'll also be asked to identify any eligibility against special funds that we have available. This year, we have two special funds, the BI3 Health Equity Fund, which invests in Black 501c3 nonprofit organizations that focus in youth mental health or birth equity. And we also have the Always Confidence Fund that is focused on building the confidence of puberty-aged people with periods. If your work naturally fits one of those two funds, you'll select yes. If not, just select no. Again, there's no benefit to selecting more work or building in more work that you're not already doing. For those funds, we will determine if you're eligible, and you'll only be funded once through Black Empowerment Works. So by and large, you're requesting up to $40,000. So now let's get into some of the specific application questions. The first one that you'll encounter asks you to describe the work you're looking to have funded. What is it? What community opportunity or issue does it address? And it should touch on the focus areas that you've selected, including any special funds. As you're answering these questions, or this question, we recommend that you consider the following bullet points. First is to lead with why, and then get to the what. Tell us what the issue or opportunity you're looking to address within your work. What's the scope of that issue? And then get into the space of explaining what exactly you're aiming to do. If there's data available that lifts up or amplifies the issue or opportunity area that you're addressing, include that data. That may look like quantitative data that's generated by researchers in the community or other really great data sources, or that may include qualitative data. What's the experiences that you're seeing in your community? You'll then get to sharing about your work. What exactly are you aiming to do in the community? And what do you feel like might be some early impacts of that work? As you're describing the work that you're doing, consider your focus areas, the population, and any special fund alignment that you've lifted up. It should be clear to the community reviewers that are looking at your application how all of these pieces connect. Again, we'll emphasize that you should consider your audience. These are other community members who may not have expertise in the space that you have expertise. If there are acronyms or other jargon, be sure to explain what those mean within the application if it's important to understand. We're going to skip questions 2 and 3 and then talk about question number 4. Question 4 asks, what would success look like for this work within 12 months, and how will you measure it? What do you hope are the short-term and long-term impacts of the work, and if it's existing work, to share previous success? As you're answering this question, you should think about this as the so what of question number 1. So in question 1, you're sharing why this work exists and what it is. This answer should answer so what, to what end, what do we think is going to happen in the community by you doing your work? You should be clear about how you'll measure success. Next Tuesday, we have a session on designing, delivering, and evaluating programs. So if you'd like to dive deeper on different methods for measuring success and other considerations, we encourage you to attend that session or watch the recording afterwards. Make sure that your measures of success are feasible and connected to your direct work. So this is a statement around scope. If you're, let's provide the example of us doing work to provide access to food, right? If we're saying that the big community problem is poverty and health and housing, that might be a little big to describe as compared to our solution. So we want to make sure that the two match. So is there data around inequities to access to food or hunger? Use that, describe your work, And then make sure that your measures of success are connected to that. So it might be the number of meals that you're bringing out into the community, or it might be families reporting that they have nutritious and stable food options throughout the week. You define what that looks like, but make sure that you're able to measure it. Sometimes people get into the space of lifting up measurements that are bigger than their individual work. So it might be that if we're doing food-based work, if we say people will reduce their hospital visits, that might be a little bit out of scope, dependent on how we're shaping our work. So those two things should be connected, and we should be able to make a direct impact. I want to note that following this session, we'll provide you with resources that gives this level of recommendation for every single question in the Black Empowerment Works application. During our time today, we're just highlighting a few that we think are really important. We now move to question number 5. What would this funding allow you to do? This question seems really simple at face value, and that's because it is. As you're answering this question, you should consider, what couldn't you do before that you can do if resources are provided? Or why does this funding matter? If you have any questions about any of these questions or any recommendations we're providing, feel free to type them in the chat, but we'll also provide some time at the end of the session for you to ask additional questions. Question number 6 is the big one. Big meaning there's a lot of content in this question, because we do try to provide a lot of guidance in the question itself. So if folks aren't able to attend any of these information sessions, they're still in a good space. So 6 is all around providing a budget. In answering this question around budget, you should consider what it takes to bring your proposed work to life. In the question, you'll see that it says, don't forget to include any staffing, space, or material costs. So you should zoom out, think about what you've proposed, and make sure you include elements that will help to bring it to life. If you have other funds that you're putting towards this program outside of your BEW request, be sure to include that in your budget, right? So if you're applying for work that's program specific, all we need is the scope of the program. If you're providing for more general information, then we need the scope of that general information. And if you have other sources of income for it, be sure to include those so that it helps reviewers understand that you could feasibly carry out this work with capacity. Feel free to use the template that we've provided. So you have 2 options in answering this question. One is to answer it within the text box in the application, and the second is to include an attachment. If you're including an attachment, you can just write in the text box the attachment. No need to repeat all of the information. Or if there's important context in your budget that may not be included in the document, feel free to put that context in the box. Again, in that resource center, we include a template for the budget, which looks like this. It will ask you the category, which we've given a couple, to describe the item, the cost of that item, the number of units. It'll calculate total cost, and you'll determine whether or not it's a part of your grant request. Note that there are instructions on this first page that help you to answer these questions if it's personnel or other sorts of items. You do not need to go into the level of minute detail where you're telling us the cost of each and every individual pencil that you're purchasing. That's too detailed, but reviewers should have a good understanding of the work that you're aiming to do. Again, you answer really early in the application the amount that you're requesting for funding. Your budget then should make clear the match to that amount that you've requested. So we encourage you to ask for what you need. Some people ask us, is it more beneficial to request a lesser amount or to request the full $40,000? We will always say, request what you need and be able to back it up in your budget. So if it is a $20,000 idea or body of work, ask for $20,000. If it's 40, ask for 40. But we encourage you not, if it's a $20,000 idea, don't try to request 40 and then pad the budget. It just leads to more questions from the reviewers. Questions 7 and 8 are sort of connected to this budget, but we won't go into those in detail. Those questions ask, what resources outside of the funding do you already have to carry out this work? And then what resources do you still need that you may not already have to carry out the work? We encourage you to answer those questions honestly because it gives the reviewer a clearer idea around feasibility. And if there are resources that you still do need, if they're sizable ones, feel free to include how you plan to secure those resources, which may include partnerships, physical space, or some other type of resource. Now we get to question 9. Question 9 is around the timeline. Just like with the prior question, you have the choice of either answering the question in the body of the application itself or uploading an attachment. As you're answering this question, you should consider key milestones. What are the big pivot points within your work? You should consider the time it might take to ramp up your work, especially if it's new work. So if you have to do a lot of recruitment or building materials, that should be reflected in your timeline. That gets back to feasibility. Ensure that your timeline is realistic and feasible, especially given your capacity. So if you're a team of 1, which is okay, probably don't put in a timeline that's super aggressive unless you feel like you can meet it. Again, no benefit to creating a timeline that isn't realistic to you, because if we select to fund your work, we're going to have that as a document that we're looking towards, though you will have some flexibility on the back end. So be sure to be realistic, but the work does have to produce measurable results by the end of the grant year. And you get to define what those measures are, which you'll do earlier in the application. Consider using an attachment if you have a more visual representation of your timeline. Again, any attachments are optional, but if this is something you already have, feel free to use that. We're getting close to the end of individual questions that we're going to be talking about, so we'll just hang on a little bit longer. Question 10 says sometimes the work is best understood by seeing it. This is space where you can provide any links to websites or social media content that will help us to better understand what you're aiming to do. I want to emphasize the last statement within this question that notes that if you don't have any links to share, it's fine. If you're sharing information, you should really treat this as supplementary, not primary. So if it's critical to your understanding your work, that should be included in the body of your application, not just in a link. This should really just bring to life what you're already doing. Leave off any inactive or outdated information or links. So if you have a website, but you haven't updated it in 5 years, or you have a social media, but there are no posts on it, don't include that within your application. This is really helping you to put your best foot forward. You can include links to videos, but they should be shorter videos. We need to recognize that our reviewers, our community reviewers, are largely volunteers. So we want to make sure that we're giving them enough of what they need to understand your work, but not inundating them with information that becomes really ancillary or outside of what's needed to understand what you're doing. And remember, again, all of this is optional. Our goal is to invest in work of different focus areas, length of service, et cetera. So not having that information will not necessarily count against you. I'm now going to shift gears and you'll hear from Will on our team.
Yes, good to see you all. So these following slides, just some of the questions that are going to be asked in the application process, and it's just for demographic purposes only. So it will not affect your chances in the grant process. So we just ask that you answer them honestly, and you also answer them in the format that is requested. The first one, go over question 11, which asked, who are the leaders of this work / your organization or group? And please provide their first and last names, separating each name by commas. I just want to emphasize the formatting is important, just for the fact that we just need to, keep records of who's going to be on your board, who's in your leadership, and also that we can cross-reference with our community advisors and community reviewers, just make sure that there isn't any like people who might be on your board who might just be also reviewing, just for safety with that. Next one we're going over is question 13, which asked, has this work organization received grants before? Again, this does not affect your ability to get a grant from us. We just kind of like to keep tabs and see how the grant dollars are given out. And for 14, it's going to be asking, have you applied for a Black Empowerment Works grant in previous years? We just want to keep tabs on who's coming back or who's applied before, just for numbers' sake, just making sure that we have data of those who've come back and those who've applied. And so, yeah. And the next part is we'll go over this in a little bit, but it's about the attachments onto the document. And again, attachments are optional and just only include what is helpful. I've kind of stated before, this section, section is optional, but you must mark it as complete, even if you don't upload. So just give you a chance to go and you will see the opportunity to upload something. But if you don't have anything to upload, you can just check it. And again, any attachments beyond timeline and budget are, which again, attachments are optional, should be supplementary information to what you've already included to the body of the application. So it shouldn't be anything that is like key if it's not your timeline or budget. And just make sure to keep it concise because reviewers are not likely to read through a 40-page document. Just something, that they can go through, again, supplementary. And again, only share what's necessary to understand your work. So if you have a study that ties directly into what you're doing, then yes, share that. Or if you have something that is what you've done before, share that. But if it's not going to be that additional piece, a little bit of supplementary information, then you do not need to share it.
So we're just going to show you the attachments section. I'm hoping you all are seeing the correct screen. Now I'm paranoid. You'll see in the section, there is a section that says attachments. It indicates which sections or which sorts of attachments you should include. So there's one for budget, timeline, and then 2 additional optional attachments. Please only include budget and timeline in these budget and timeline spaces and any other additional materials here. Just like Will noted, if you don't have things to upload, that's fine. Just click Save/Upload Attachments and mark as completed, and you'll see the status change here. You'll see save options within each section that mirror that as well. So save my work, mark as completed. In order to submit, every section has to be saved and marked as completed. So now there's time for folks have questions. There is one question in the chat that I want to make sure that we touch on. So Andre asks, can you guys speak to the process of collaboration between organizations and startups applying for funds? I'll start with that second question. If you're a startup, that is perfectly fine. Our eligibility requirement just states that your work has to be far enough along in design or execution to produce measurable results. So that needs to be true for you to apply. If you're truly starting to think about what your organization is, that might be too early stage for us. On collaboration. So this is a piece that we've been building out into the system in the background, and I'll share with you all right now, though the online system and the website doesn't reflect it. We do have the option for you to either apply as a single entity or as a collaborative. Note that a single entity, what that means for us is that you as an organization or individual or group are applying for these funds and you will be responsible for managing them and carrying out the results. You may have other partners that are in that process with you, but they're not going to be directly connected to us as a United Way. You hold a lot of the decision-making power. For those types of single entity applications, you have the ability to request up to $40,000. But we recognize that sometimes you have organizations that are working or groups that are working very closely together, where you might think it might be advantageous for multiple of you all to apply through Black Empowerment Works at the same time. If it's true that if any one of those folks in the partnership are not funded, then the whole work falls apart, then you have the option to apply as a collaborative. For it to be a collaborative, 3 things pretty much have to be true. One is that you have shared decision-making power with with defined roles. The second is that you have shared resources. So each of you might be pooling your resources together, or you're utilizing resources within the work. And the third is that you have to have shared accountability towards the results. So each of you are all working in sync to get to that end result of your outcome that you're seeking to bring to life. Everyone should have a role in that. If your work meets that definition of a collaborative, you have the ability to apply as a collaborative. It's the same application. Some of your content just might be slightly different. With a collaborative, you have the ability to request up to $75,000. But what's important to note is, one, anyone named in a collaborative, that application counts as your one application per year. So you do not have the ability to then submit an application for your single organization. Additionally, you'll have one person who serves as the collaborative lead through the grant process. So just like we showed you today, that person would create the organization and fill out the eligibility form. They can add additional contacts for you all to work together, but they would serve as our primary point of contact. So if we have questions on the application, they would be the ones receiving the email. When we look to schedule the conversation between your reviewers and your team, they would be the sole person receiving that contact. On the back end, you all would work collaboratively and all be named as grant recipients. I hope that is super clear. It looks like we have another question in the chat that says, please clarify other grants for this particular project or any grants in general, and over what time frame. Great question, Pamela. So for us, we want to make sure that you're listing any other grant funds that are going to help you to bring the work to life within the grant cycle. If you're focused on a single program or project, you only need to indicate grant funds that help to bring that program or project to life. If you're looking at some broader work, then you should lift up any grant funds that you have to carry out that broader work. Again, it's helping the reviewers who are looking at your application understand if you have the capacity and resources to carry out the work as you've described. Other questions from folks, feel free to come off mute if you have them.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I do have a question. Sorry, I be here in the job. I be trying not to get too loud. But good question I just had. So like my organization that I actually currently work for, we do serve the Northern Kentucky area. And it's kind of tied into the work. If there is a space where my job decides to apply for a grant to try to make something happen, and I still do it, and I'm kind of on both of them, does that work, or should I just tell them to kick rocks and I'm just gonna do it because I'm gonna
That is
start something myself?
such a great question, and I'm so glad you lifted that up. So we have the policy to say that if you're involved in multiple organizations, so long as there are other people on that leadership team beyond the people connected to one application, it's fine. And so long as the work is different. So what I mean by that is I, as Janae, work at United Way, but I'm also on the board of the Mercantile Library. While neither of those organizations would be eligible to apply for Black Empowerment Works, let's pretend. If both organizations were looking to apply, it would be fine because I'm one member of their leadership team of 2 organizations doing very different work. If it was the same body of work, not eligible. If the 2 organizations had the same leadership teams, because sometimes that happens where you have multiple businesses, but the same folks aren't involved, not eligible. Glad to answer that question for you, Andre.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I see Terrell has a question in the chat. If an applicant requests a smaller amount out of the $40,000, is there ever an event or possibility that reviewers feel that more should be awarded and is awarded? The answer to that is yes. So we've had a couple of instances where people have requested small amounts of money and the reviewers have looked at the application and said, this doesn't seem sufficient to carry out this work. I would not rely on that being the vehicle to get the amount of resources that you need, because those instances have been pretty few and far between throughout the process, but it has happened. Thank you for asking, Terrell. All right, we have another question. Are sole proprietor currently considered a single entity if the goal is to become an association? Yes. So we consider a single entity as just a group of, how do I want to describe this? It's one group or business or individual that's carrying out a body of work. So it doesn't so much matter how many people are involved if all of those people aren't equally responsible for contributing to the results. So if you're a sole proprietor looking to turn into an association, that would still be a single entity. Thank you for asking. And any folks who have started an application or submitted an application and might change theirs based on this information about collaboratives, we do have the ability to reopen that application for you. So you are perfectly fine in that process. Other questions from folks? Thank you for having such great ones already.
Hey, how you doing, Ms. Bradley? I had a quick question for you, real quick.
Mhm.
I was wondering, and I seen it. I guess I kept getting stuck on the program part because I felt like I just did something literally the exact same. So I didn't know if it was like me, me kind of like clicking on the same thing. But once I actually complete the program part, then I will be accessing the application with all the questions that we just went over. Just wanted to
Yes.
make sure. Okay, cool.
The system is super redundant. So you will feel like you're answering the same question 15 times. If we could redesign the system, that wouldn't be the case. But in the event of us using what we have, that is what's true. And which is why we stepped through it with you today. So you are not alone in feeling like you're doing the same thing 15 times over. But soon you'll get to the full set of questions.
Okay, cool. I do appreciate you. Thank you.
Mhm. You have a question? Oh, go
I have
ahead.
yeah, I went to create my I don't know what to call it, sign in or whatever, and it still had my information from last year.
Mhm.
And I need to delete, I guess, the title, because that's not the title of my grant application this time. How do I go in and I can just go in and change that, and because it was still up from last year, is it still, I guess, counted for this year? Is it still official? Am I in, or what?
So I'm going to answer multiple things so I make sure that I'm getting to your question. What I hear is that you had an account created last year to apply for a specific body of work. And this year you're looking to apply for a different body of work. You have a couple of options there. One, you can request for us to change what your organization name shows up as or any other details. I don't believe that that's a level of change that you can make, but we can easily do that for you. Your application from last year exists in our system on the back end, but isn't automatically carried over to this year. So it is the equivalent of starting with a fresh slate. If you would like to see any information that you've submitted in prior years, you can send an email to our email address, black-led@uwgc.org, and we'll send you all of the documents you've submitted to us in the past. But we count each year as a new year and a new start in the process since we have new community reviewers coming in.
Okay. Now I did complete like the questions and stuff that were asked, but I did still see like I said, the title from last year. So I was just trying to make sure, or make
The
sure
title
that
for your organization or the title for your program from last
the
year?
title for the program from last year.
Okay, so I think I know what you're doing, and I'm going to share my screen again and see if I'm getting to what you're experiencing. 1 second. Sorry if you see yourself for a minute.
No problem.
So when you log into the system, you have this ability to click program profiles. Program profiles will show you any program that you've created that exists in the system, but that is not necessarily the program attached to your current application. If you're looking to create a new program, all you would do again would be, there'd be a section here if I didn't already create a program that says create a program and assign it to this form packet. And that would again create a brand new program for you. So all of that information exists in the system. It is not attached to this application.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. And if I have any other questions, I'll email.
Of course.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I see a question that I want to make sure I get to. Are there any sample templates of the application? In the information packet, we provide you the list of all of the questions, but there isn't a sample like application that we've submitted, or an application that gives an example of what we would be looking for. And the reason that we've gone that route is we recognize that there's such a broad variety of work that would be applicable that we don't want folks writing to that sample. So we've chosen to provide this information in this session to help get to that sample request without sort of steering folks into a specific direction. And we may revisit that and say that that's not the most helpful process, but our reviewers are trained to look towards the heart of the program, to ask really great questions, and then make decisions from there. Each year, which makes the process a little hard, there is amazing work that doesn't end up getting funded for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's just the amount of resources that we have available. Thank you all for your great questions. I'm going to close us out with some final information to share. Within this packet that you'll receive after this session, we've included some general tips for submitting grant applications. This is helpful to you within your Black Empowerment Works application, but also really helpful beyond this. So if you're watching this recording now, you have the ability to pause to read through this information. If you're participating in the session live, we'll send you an email that has all of these tips. They include things like reading through the information thoroughly to ensure alignment and not applying for work outside of your scope, highlighting why you're best positioned to carry out this work and what makes you unique, asking great questions if you have them. So we provide our contact information and encourage you to reach out. Assume that your audience doesn't know about your work and possibly have someone who doesn't know your work well review it prior to submission. We make this option available where the Black Empowerment Works staff, since we aren't the ones making decisions, can do a preliminary review of your content and just lift up some key questions we think reviewers might have. Long term, you'll want to think about sustainability and what happens after any given grant cycle. So if you're hiring staff members based on a grant, you have to think about how do we keep that staff member around if we're keeping them around post-grant cycle and more. Again, we have supports available to you throughout the process. This is our second BEW workshop. We have 2 more coming up: designing, delivering, and evaluating programs, and building a budget that works. You have the ability to schedule a question session with us, an unlimited number of 30-minute virtual meetings to discuss questions that you have. If it is a quicker or shorter question, feel free to call us or send us an email at the email address and phone number on the screen. And again, you have that ability to sign up for a pre-submission review by sending us an email and requesting it. Your application does have to be completed at least 2 weeks before the deadline to request this option. Thank you all so much. We went through all of that information really quickly, but we hope that it's super beneficial for you as you're applying for Black Empowerment Works and beyond. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us at any time. Have a great rest of your day. Bye, y'all.